Alright travelers, you've spent hours grinding artifacts, perfecting your team comps, and pulling off insane elemental reactions. Now it's time to put all that to the test against some of Genshin Impact's toughest foes. Weekly bosses are the ultimate challenge, offering intense battles, jaw-dropping animations, and of course, some of the best rewards in the game. But let's be real, not all bosses are created equal. Some are thrilling, others are just there. So today, we're ranking every weekly boss in Genshin Impact based on how exciting, challenging, and downright epic their fights are. Whether they're pushing your mechanics to the limit or just flexing their insane cutscenes, we're breaking down who truly deserves the title of the best boss battle in Teyvat. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. Andreas, the good old Wolf of the North. If you started playing Genshin Impact early on, you probably remember how intimidating he seemed at first. A massive spectral wolf dashing around the arena, howling like he's about to end your whole career. But let's be honest, once you get past the initial spectacle, Andreas is basically a glorified game of tag. He spends most of Phase 1 zooming across the battlefield, leaving you to chase him down like some desperate adventurer trying to collect lost Mora. If you're using characters with stationary abilities, like say, Bennett's Burst, yeah, good luck with that. He'll be halfway across the map before you can even blink. Then comes Phase 2, which promises a little more variety but doesn't quite deliver. Sure, he stops running around as much, but now you get to deal with his lovely cryo and anemo immunities. Fantastic. It's like the game is personally punishing you for bringing the wrong elements. And let's not forget those hitboxes. Sometimes it feels like you dodged perfectly, only to still get smacked by a gust of wind that probably wasn't even aimed at you. To make matters worse, the fight isn't particularly difficult, just unnecessarily long. The wolf isn't tanky, but between all the dashing, invincibility frames, and awkward attack windows, it starts to feel like you're stuck in a bad loop. And look, I get it, Andreas has his charm, he's a cool lore character, and his connection to Razor makes for a neat story moment. But compared to the other weekly bosses, he's just not bringing enough to the table. There's a reason nobody is rushing to fight him unless they absolutely need those talent materials. And come on, MiHoYo didn't even give him his own teleport waypoint. That alone speaks volumes. Dvalin, the so-called Storm Terror, the mighty dragon who once terrorized Mondstadt and caused all that chaos, only to become the easiest weekly boss in Genshin Impact. Let's be real. The first time you fight him, it actually feels like a big deal. The cutscenes are dramatic, the music is intense, and the whole flying through the sky intro makes you feel like you're about to take on something truly terrifying. But then, well, the power creep hits, and suddenly, this fearsome dragon is less of a boss fight and more of a glorified punching bag. As your team gets stronger, Dvalin becomes ridiculously easy. At some point, you stop fighting him and just start flexing on him. Players with high-level characters can literally delete him in seconds. You don't even get to experience half of his mechanics because he barely has time to do anything before you knock him out. And let's not forget the ultimate insult. Dvalin spends half the fight just lying down, exposing his weak spot like he's practically asking you to end his suffering. For a creature that once caused a whole crisis in Mondstadt, this is just sad. But hey, at least there's one silver lining. He's an easy source of weekly boss materials. If you need talent level ups for certain characters, Dvalin is basically a free loot dispenser at this point. No stress, no challenge, just a quick in and out farm session. It's a shame though, because he had one of the most epic introductions in the game. Now, he's just the guy you one-shot for some dream solvent and a couple of gladiator pieces. What a fall from grace. Alright, let's talk about one of the most iconic weekly bosses in Genshin Impact. None other than Child, the 11th Fatui Harbinger. This fight is special because it's the first time we square off against a fully human boss. And let's be real, it does not disappoint. After spending time working alongside Child and thinking, hey, maybe this guy isn't so bad, we get hit with a brutal reality check. Turns out he's been scheming behind the scenes the whole time, and now it's time to throw hands in an all-out high-stakes duel. And trust me, he does not hold back. Child's boss fight is a pure adrenaline rush from start to finish. He wastes zero time running around or doing unnecessary animations. He's coming straight for you with relentless attacks. His signature Riptide mechanic forces you to stay on your toes. because if you're not careful, you'll be taking a lot more damage than you'd like. And just when you think you've got his patterns down, bam, he switches forms. 3 phases, each faster and flashier than the last, keeping you constantly adapting. Oh, and let's not forget the absolute madness of his final phase, where he casually summons a giant whale to crash down on the battlefield. Because, why not? But what makes this fight so good isn't just the spectacle, it's how fair it is. The game gives you all the tools you need to survive, but it's up to you to master dodging, timing, and managing your stamina. Every attack is well telegraphed, but the fight moves so quickly that you never feel like you can relax. It's this perfect balance of challenge and excitement that makes Child's weekly boss fight one of the best in the game. So whether you're farming his materials or just there for the thrill, this battle always delivers. Apep. The Guardian of Apep's Oasis is one of the most visually stunning weekly bosses in Genshin Impact, and everything about it screams epic showdown. Until you actually start the fight. The setting? Gorgeous. The music? Absolutely mesmerizing. And that eerie, decayed model? It tells a story all on its own, hinting at the majestic creature Apep once was. The phase transition is especially breathtaking, with flowers blooming on its withered body as it revives. Easily one of the best animations in the game. You'd think this battle would be an unforgettable clash against a mighty ancient serpent, right? Well, not quite. Instead of a full-on battle with this legendary being, most of your time is spent swatting down smaller mobs. Apep itself takes a bit of a backseat while you deal with waves of enemies, which makes the fight feel more like a glorified ruin serpent encounter than the awe-inspiring boss battle it could have been. That's not to say it's a bad fight. It just doesn't take full advantage of Apep's unique design. You're left waiting for its actual attacks, only for the game to throw more mobs at you instead of letting you go toe-to-toe with this ancient beast. If you want to make quick work of this fight, bringing a strong Hydro character with solid AoE damage is a great move. Someone like Neuvillette can wipe out those pesky summons in no time. Otherwise, you might find yourself spending more time cleaning up minions than actually fighting Apep. It's still a visually impressive encounter, but let's be honest, this battle deserved to be so much more. The weekly bosses of Genshin Impact. The ultimate test of patience, skill, and sometimes sheer luck. Whether you're farming for talent materials or just looking to flex on some of Teyvat's strongest foes, these fights always keep things interesting. And today, we're talking about one of the most intense and cinematic boss battles in the game. La Signora's Trial of Ice and Fire. This fight isn't just a test of your team's strength. It's a showdown that ties directly into the game's most dramatic story moments. Signora doesn't just throw attacks at you, she puts you through an elemental gauntlet. The first phase? Pure cryo chaos. She'll slow you down, freeze you solid, and make you scramble for pyro damage just to stay warm. But just when you think you've got things under control, she shifts into her pyro form and turns the battlefield into a furnace. Now, the game flips. Suddenly, cryo attacks are your best friend, and you're the one struggling to stay cool. It's a dynamic fight that forces you to adapt, making it one of the most mechanically engaging battles among the weekly bosses. But what really sets this fight apart is the setting and the stakes. You're not just fighting some random monster, you're facing a Fatui Harbinger, one of the most dangerous people in the game's lore. And let's be honest, after everything she did in the story, taking her down feels good. The tight arena, the shifting mechanics, and the sheer spectacle of it all make this fight one of Genshin Impact's best. Even though Signora is currently out of the picture, her boss fight remains unforgettable, and every time you go back to challenge her, it's just as epic as the first time. Alright, let's talk about Ajdaha, one of the most intense and visually stunning weekly bosses in Genshin Impact. If you've ever faced this ancient behemoth, you know exactly what I mean. This guy doesn't just fight, he erupts onto the battlefield, shaking the entire underground arena with his massive presence. And the music? Absolute perfection. It sets the stage for what feels less like a boss fight and more like an epic showdown from a lost legend. But trust me, if you walk into this fight unprepared, Ajdaha will personally make sure you regret it. What makes Ajdaha stand out from the rest of the weekly bosses is his ability to absorb elements and unleash devastating shockwaves. One week, he's throwing hydro-infused quakes at you. The next, he's raining down pyro destruction. It's like fighting 4 different bosses at once. This elemental unpredictability keeps the battle fresh, but it also makes things tricky. If you're not paying attention to his patterns, you'll be spending more time reviving your team than actually fighting. And if you walk in without a solid shielder, well, let's just say Ajdaha is not the forgiving type. But despite the chaos, this fight is one of the most rewarding in the game. Every move Ajdaha makes feels weighty and impactful, and dodging his attacks just in time gives that satisfying adrenaline rush. The challenge is real, but so is the sense of accomplishment when you finally bring him down. And let's be honest, who doesn't love flexing their best characters in a battle that truly tests your skills? Just do yourself a favor. Bring a shielder. Zhongli, Layla, heck, even Noelle. Anyone will do. Because without one, Ajdaha is going to make sure you feel every second of his ancient grudge. Weekly boss fights in Genshin Impact, where we willingly throw ourselves into battle against some of the most powerful enemies in the game, all for the chance to get some much-needed talent materials. Some of these fights are cinematic masterpieces, while others feel like Hoyoverse just wanted to see how much suffering we could endure. But among all the bosses, one fight stands out as a true test of skill, patience, and, let's be honest, how well you can dodge. Magatsu Mitake Narukami no Mikoto, better known as Boss Raiden. This battle is something special. It's not just about whittling down a massive health bar, it's a full-blown story moment that lets you step into the shoes of Ai, fighting to reclaim control from her own creation. The arena? A stark, endless void that perfectly captures the cold eternity Raiden Shogun sought. The moves? Fast, brutal, and some of the flashiest in the game. She's one of the few bosses that actually lets you practice dodging her attacks before the fight, which is both a blessing and a warning, because once she transforms into Baleful Shadow Lord, mistakes aren't just punished, they're obliterated. But here's the thing. Despite how overwhelming she seems, this fight is fair. Every attack has a pattern, every phase has a weakness, and every win feels earned. It's the kind of fight that makes you appreciate how much Genshin Impact's combat has evolved. In a way, it's almost like a mini Soulsborne experience, except instead of a giant, decrepit knight with a tragic backstory, it's an electrified goddess who can cut islands in half. And if that's not peak Genshin, I don't know what is. Alright, let's talk about one of the most insane weekly bosses in Genshin Impact. Shuki no Kami, aka Scaramouche's giant mecha rage moment. This fight is easily one of the most cinematic in the game, and honestly, it feels like the closest thing to battling an actual Archon. In the first phase, you're dealing with a pretty straightforward fight, using special buttons around the arena to counter his attacks. Not too bad, right? But then, just when you think you've got things under control, the dude upgrades. The mech sprouts legs, and suddenly, you realize you're in for a wild ride. Phase 2 is where things get crazy. Attacks start coming from every angle, forcing you to dodge non-stop while trying to gather enough energy to counter his ultimate move. And trust me, if you don't time it right, he drops a massive energy bomb that wipes you out with an unblockable shockwave. It's basically the game telling you, yeah, you messed up. But if you do pull it off, you get that satisfying moment where Scaramouche's defenses drop, leaving him wide open for a full-on beatdown. This fight is peak Genshin, flashy, intense, and packed with lore. The fact that Scaramouche goes from a discarded puppet to an actual god-tier opponent just makes this battle even more impactful. Plus, seeing Nahida's familiar come in clutch, that's some top-tier storytelling. Whether you love him or hate him, this boss fight cements Scaramouche as one of the most iconic characters in Genshin history. Alright, so let's talk about the all-devouring Narwhal, probably the most dramatic weekly boss fight in Genshin Impact. You know how some bosses love dragging things out with long, annoying invincibility phases? Yeah, this thing takes that to the next level. At first, it's all over the place, dodging everything like it's training for some celestial gymnastics competition. You'll get a few windows to chip away at its shield, but don't even think about going for a big burst of damage yet. This phase is purely about survival and patience. Just keep up the pressure until you crack through that ridiculous shield. Now, the second phase? This is where things get real. The music kicks into overdrive, and suddenly, the Narwhal isn't just some cosmic fish anymore. It's a full-on humanoid warrior with an insane, aggressive playstyle. This thing is fast, relentless, and absolutely does not believe in giving you a breather. If you're not constantly moving, dodging, and countering, you're gonna get wrecked. Every attack feels like it's designed to keep you in a state of sheer panic. But hey, that's part of the fun, right? Then, after what feels like the most intense battle of your life, the Narwhal just flops. Seriously, it goes from being this god-tier, realm-devouring entity to lying there like a beached whale, completely vulnerable. This is your moment. Unleash every ounce of damage you've got, because it's not getting up anytime soon. It's a brutal fight, but once you figure out the patterns and keep your cool, it's one of the most satisfying wins in the game. Arlecchino is hands down one of Genshin Impact's most hyped characters. Fans have been waiting for her since the Fatui teaser, and let me tell you, she doesn't disappoint. Whether it's her playable version or her boss fight, Arlecchino is a force to be reckoned with. After diving into Fontaine's story quests, the significance of this battle hits you even harder. It's not just a boss fight, it's an experience that ties in perfectly with the story. And trust me, if you've fought her, you know just how intense it gets. Let's talk mechanics. Arlecchino is not an easy opponent by any means. The first phase already feels like a serious challenge, with her lightning-fast attacks and devastating moves that can wipe you out if you're not careful. You need to be quick on your feet, especially with her lunging attack right after she revives. It's crucial to keep your elemental burst ready or dash at the perfect moment to dodge that incoming damage. If you don't, you'll be in for a world of hurt. And just when you think you've got her figured out, Arlecchino pulls out all the stops in her second phase. She sprouts wings and comes back stronger than ever, with a set of moves that can end your run in a heartbeat. Her Crimson Spikes are no joke, and you have to be on your toes to avoid getting hit. Honestly, this fight is one of the hardest in the game, and it'll test your skills in ways few bosses can. If you manage to take her down, you'll walk away with some serious bragging rights. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.